Okay, good morning, everybody. If you could take your, I don't think that the coffee, Ann, is the water hot enough yet? Ann? She can't hear me. The coffee and tea are not quite ready yet. We're sorry about that. We forgot to turn the power strip on. So, um, so feel free, maybe, somebody said that that light will come on the coffee pot when it's done. So feel free, if you see that on, we won't be upset if you get up and go help yourself to some coffee. Okay? So can we, that one's mine. Yeah, that's mine. Thank you. And that's my pen. Where'd my pen go? Oh, I didn't leave the pen. No. Okay. No, I'm good. Thank you. Sorry. Good morning, everybody. My name is Diana Cohane. I'm the chairperson of the Sustainability Committee for Tyngsboro. Today's session focuses on practical approaches. This is not working. To yard management that supports, this is not working. I can hear. It supports soil health, improves drainage, and increases habitat diversity. Does this work better here? Okay. We'll look at local examples and explore steps that can be adapted to different types of properties, whether large or small. Across this series, we've looked at food systems and community preparedness. Today's session brings that conversation closer to home, literally, that we manage every day. The first speaker today is going to be Giancarla Kalpas. She comes to us from Chelmsford. In 2020, Giancarla learned about Dr. Robert Jaguar's research and his optimistic message that by planting the plants that he recommends, we can restore pollination systems and save species from extinction. Giancarla is now an ambassador for the Bumblebee Project and enthusiastically promotes the plants and garden management style needed by pollinators that are at risk through garden tours, lectures, and workshops. And you'll hear more from her about that. Come on up, Giancarla. Thank you.
So you do the slide. So first of all, I want to say I'm very happy you invited me here, but I'm not an expert. I'm not a scientist. I'm nuts. I get passionate about something, and I want to fix the problem. And my journey with conservation started with bluebirds, and maybe some of you used to know Mrs. Lillian Files. She was my mentor in the beginning. I learned from her how to attract bluebirds to my yard. And I attracted them to my yard. I said, that's not enough. I'm going to put up, I have over 100 bluebird boxes throughout Chelmsford. And I've been doing this for over 30 years. And I monitor regularly. I keep track of what's going on. And I've fledged so far over 3,000 bluebird babies. So with that success, when I learned about Dr. Jaguar's research through the Bumblebee Project, their programs, and he said, don't believe me, just do it, plant the plants, and then you tell me if it is true or not what I'm teaching you. Well, we planted that garden at the Sunny Meadow Farm in South Chelmsford in 2021. In 2022, we had the 2 bumblebees that are at risk of becoming extinct. So I said, if you do it, they will come and you make a difference. So what do we have here? Let's go to the, what is, see, I wish I could see this, but anyways. So what is a native pollination system? It's a native plant and all the animals that pollinate it. So we need to talk about what is a native plant. Well, I tell you, every plant is native somewhere. Like the Japanese knotweed is native to Japan. So even when you buy plants, the label might say native, but it could be native to the Midwest or to south of here. So if you really want to restore native systems, you need to know, is it native to this ecoregion? Is it native? You don't have to say, is it native to, Tingsboro, because there are no records maybe for Tingsboro going back 500-600 years. But if it is native to the ecoregion, then it's a good choice. And why is it important? Oh, look at that. I can look over there, so I know what is over here. Oh, that is why you have two screens. I know it. Okay. And so the plants and the pollinators have co-evolved not just for thousands of years, for millions of years. And they have developed relationships where they know what they like and they know what they need to survive. That is why if we bring a plant from another continent, very, very few animals will use it. So we're just wasting that space. So what is pollination? It is sex for plants. Why? Because plants have boys and girls, but they cannot go to dances and meet each other. So they need to have a matchmaker. So some of the plants are pollinated by wind and water, but the vast majority, they are pollinated by animals. And the animals could be insects, it could be birds, even mammals in some cases, lizards in some parts of the country, or tropical areas where they have lizards. So, and why, so what, so when a bee, say a bee visits a flower, why does a bee visit a flower? The bee does not care about the reproduction of the plant. The bee goes to the flowers because there are resources there that they need. The pollen is to feed their young ones. It is rich in protein, and that is the baby food for the baby, the larvae of the bees. And then the nectar, they need it for themselves, for the adult phase of the bees. And so that is why they go. But as they go from flower to flower to collect what they need, for instance, bumblebees are very hairy bodies. The pollen grains get attached to their furry bodies. And when they go to the next plant, the pollen gets deposited accidentally on the female part, and that is a chance for the plant to produce seeds and berries and fruit. And that is how we have more plants. So that is the relationship. It is just, they're not doing it to help each other, they're just doing it to survive. And then, so when we have the pollination, we see in that picture that the plants are at the bottom of food webs. Plants get the energy from the sun, and then the energy gets transferred from the plant to the herbivores, those nasty rabbits that eat our plants. And then there are predators of the herbivores. We have the carnivores and upper levels of predators, and that is how we keep the food web going. So here is an example of a native rose where there are, now I cannot even see what it says. Now, there are about 400 different species of bees in Massachusetts. Some of them are in trouble, but not all of them. So part of the research that Dr. Jiguiá has done and still does is to see, we don't want to have more and more of the bees that don't need help. They're doing well, they're prospering, but there are a few species, and in fact, we have already lost 2 species of bumblebees from the state. We don't want to lose any more, so that is why it's so important to plant the right plants. So what he has done, he has said, okay, Bombus fervidus is in decline. Let's look in the fields to see where does Bombus fervidus go to collect the pollen and nectar, and then let's plant more of those plants. So that is what that list. We have a handout from not the last page was added. It's not part of Dr. Jiguiá's, but this part here, it shows the pollen sources and the nectar sources that are needed by the bees at risk. So you see, in this case of this rose, the bumblebee is getting the pollen and the nectar. Then we have a moth that eats the leaves of the plant, and then we have the bird that eats the moth. So if we didn't have the native rose, we would lose everything else that depends on it. So we talked about native, the concept of native in the realm of plants. There are also non-natives in the realm of the insects. If I can also backtrack, in the realm of birds. If you know about bluebirds, you know that the house sparrow is competing and killing the bluebirds, and that is not a native species. That is why it is illegal to get rid of it. So what is well, it's not the only one, but the big category of non-native bees is the honeybees. And I'm sorry to, if you are a beekeeper, I know you love your bees, but they're not native. They're competing greatly with the native bees. I've seen them in the garden that I planted at the farm. There were plants in bloom, and they were full of bees. The bumblebees were busy going. You see how they go from flower to flower, collecting. The bumblebees were coming from the rear, taking the pollen from the pollen sacs of the bumblebees. They were not even doing their own work. They were collecting the pollen that had already been collected. So that is one example, the food competition. They also spread diseases. There's just so many of them, thousands of bees in a beehive. The native bees have smaller families, just a queen with her offspring, maybe a couple of generations of workers. All right. So on the other thing, I think it is written here that if you want more non-natives, get honeybees, because they are very good at pollinating your bittersweet and your Japanese knotweed. So somebody told me, I heard one presentation, they said, okay, honeybees have a place in agriculture. If you have acres and acres of blueberries, they come with trucks with the hives, and they pollinate those fields, and when that is done, they move them to another crop. But, oh no, I lost my train of thought.
I know that feeling.
It happens all the time. So, yeah, well, I don't know what was coming. Yes, so they have a place. Yeah, now I got it, thank you. They have a place in agriculture. But in your backyard, people think, oh, I'm doing great. I'm helping the ecosystem. I have honeybees in my backyard. That is as good as saying, I keep chickens in my backyard, so I'm helping the birds. So it's a similar thing. If you have honeybees in your backyard, you're doing it because you love them, you enjoy them, you appreciate how they work, you eat the honey, but you're not helping the ecosystem. In fact, it's a detriment. So I know some people will be offended by this, but that's what I have learned. All right, so when we were looking at the food chain, the food web is like this house of cards. If we lose too many, the scientists are very concerned. I watch as many Zoom webinars that I can find, okay? They say we've lost millions of birds. We have lost it. They call it the insect apocalypse. And guess what? We are part of that food web. If things go bad for insects, things are going to be bad for us. Insects are not the enemy. We need insects to pollinate for all the functions they have in the ecosystem. So we need to think about that. So when we have healthy pollination systems, native pollination systems, we get so many benefits for free from nature that if we had to build machines, if we were able to invent them, to do these products and services for us, it would be very expensive. So they store carbon. Somebody said, well, can't we just invent a machine that store carbons? I said, well, duh, we have trees. We have that machine. So then if we have a healthy system, then the plants will filter the water and they will purify the air. So we all need to have clean water. We cannot live without it. We cannot live without, not fresh air, but clean air. Next page. Okay, this is a very important part of very important services the plants do. They keep the soil in place. Remember the Dust Bowl? I wasn't here yet, but not that old, right? We've heard about it. And that is because the plants, they were not they were all those farms, right? The roots are not very deep. And so whether you have erosion, whether you have a flood situation, or whether you have a drought, it helps to have the plants that keep the soil in place. So another big important service is decomposing. If we did not have decomposers, we would be buried in leaves or fallen trees. So they help, the fungi, they help enrich the soil. They are very, very important part of the soil and of plant health. So I want to show you now the difference in the root length between native and non-native plants. On one side you have, I don't know what the plants are, says Spirea, daylilies, some fancy grass, and the lawn grass. Very, very short root lengths compared to native plants. The native plants reach deeper and keep the soil in place, whether you have a drought or a flood. And in the next picture, you see it even more. Again, here we have, this is your lawn grass. Okay, so this is, when I found this picture, I need to grab it. So let's see what can we do in our own yard. It could be a flower pot on your deck. If that is all you have, put a native plant in there. And I say messy is the new beautiful. That's my yard. The neighbor across the street, I think she hates me. She doesn't hate me. We have become friends. But her yard is so different from mine because she has, the lawn where you see the lines that the mower makes. But last year she was the president of the Chelmsford Garden Club. They were doing a garden tour. She came over. She says, "Would you like your garden? Can we have your gardening? My garden is messy, okay? Can you be part of our garden tour so we can show people a different way of gardening?" I said, "Wow, this is good." I was a little embarrassed because it's messy, but 100 people came. They saw my garden. They saw, I even gave a plant to somebody. What is that plant? I said, "Oh, you want it?" So,
sorry to interrupt. I'm not getting any audio down there. Hi.
hello.
Hello. Is it working now? No. Hello. Try that one.
Well,
Hold it just like that. Just talk right into it.
Yeah, tried it first. It didn't work, right? So, don't remove all your leaves from your property. Leave them as much as you can where they fall. Why do you want to go and rake all your leaves and then you pay for somebody to bring you mulch? And then you're going to spend hours and hours to spread the mulch. Mulch is not good. If you need to put any mulch, get just plain wood chips. Because you know what? I heard that the mulch you buy, that bark mulch, is ground up building material. So who knows what's in it? And then they put a color, anyways, think about it, okay? Better to keep the leaves on your property. They decompose. They provide insulation. Those bumblebee queens that overwinter underground in the wintertime, they benefit from having layers of leaves on top. So leave the leaves and, oh, don't cut the stems. What does that mean? Yeah, in my yard, I have all the dead plants. They're there. Why? Because first of all, I don't need to buy bird seed anymore because I leave the plant standing. So throughout the fall, when the seeds mature, the birds are eating. The bird feeder is all over my property, right? All the seeds from the plants. Then those stems, not all plants, but many of the plants, eventually some bees can nest in those stems. So I leave them. And then in the spring, these are perennials, most of them. The new plants grow. They go right through and they cover, Joe Pye is this big. Well, some stems get cut because, the snow, the wind brings them down. But whatever is standing, and then the new plant covers it up. And then eventually the stems break and decompose. Again, they enrich the soil. You don't need to buy fertilizer. You don't need to buy bird seed. You don't need to buy mulch. See how much money I saved you already? So the next one. Yes, so the alien says, you guys, why are you growing this big lawn? Are you eating it? Says, no, it's just to compete with my neighbor to see who has the greener grass, right? So reduce your lawn. So I did not do a major overhaul in my yard. I just, if this was a flower bed, every year I put in a few inches more, decrease the lawn that way. So the lawn by now is just a pass among the flower beds. Okay, I'm going to say something. Debbie's going to talk about Dr. Talamy, but he has a saying that goes like this. If you want to have plants just to have something pretty to look at, get a statue. And copying from him, I say, well, get some plastic flowers. I've seen people that have plastic flowers. You do as much good for the environment, if you put non-native plants or grass. So I recommend, again, like I said, Dr. Jagia's plants because I've planted them and I have seen the results. And the goal is to have food, which means pollen and nectar, from the time the queen emerge in the spring to the time they hibernate in the fall. So you should have a constant supply of pollen and nectar. So a plant usually might bloom for maybe a couple of weeks, maybe a month or even 2, depending on the species, but you should try to have a continuous supply of these resources. Buy straight species. Do you know what that means? When you go to buy a plant, if it says Cornus florida, which is a dogwood, right? The native dogwood. If it says after that, in quotation mark, Cherokee princess, that means it's a cultivar. It's not a straight species. It has been manipulated in some way by the horticultural industry. So it is not as beneficial as a straight species. There are some cultivars that don't even have pollen. So what use is that to the bees? They're sterile. Some of them are sterile, right? Do not use pesticides, fungicides, insecticides. Side means to kill. So you're killing not just the target species. Some people fog their yard because they don't want mosquitoes or ticks. But you're not just killing those 2 species. You're killing the butterflies. You're killing other insects that we like to see more. So if you like birds, you need to have native plants because you know what baby birds like to eat? Caterpillars. So you need to have plants that feed caterpillars. It's all connected. So we need to think about what we do in our yards and how they impact nature. So any questions? I think I finished, right? That was the last one.
We're going to run over here. Run this mic to the question, too. Oh. Hi. Well, I love my husband very much, but he tells me he would rather mow like this. And so if I try and put a flower garden, maybe two, maybe three, such as you're talking about, it's that. And I line them usually with stones, but so they get knocked off. So I'm wondering if you have any suggestions of how to make that easier for the mower doing paths.
Maybe instead of having winding paths, make straight paths, which is something, you know, people sometimes critique, and I understand it's a deficit of mine. When I plant things, they're all in rows. That is my math teacher background. So I plant everything, and it doesn't look appealing to some people. They like more rounded, garden flower beds. But you could make them straight, so the paths are straight, and the mower can go back and forth. That would be my suggestion. Any other questions? Or yes.
Sorry, we have to keep running around with this mic. Oh, you do? Oh, good. I was looking for batteries. Thank you.
Check, check.
Put this right up to your
Yes, a question.
Oh, is this working?
Yes.
A question about perennials over the winter.
Yeah.
So they're there, you don't want us to cut them and take the leaves away. What if there's a virus or some other bad thing on the leaves?
Well, then in that case, I give you permission to cut it, but you don't need to cut 100 different plants if you only have one or two that you think is diseased.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay. Especially lilies seem to have those spots.
Yeah, those
And
are not,
irises. Yeah.
those are not native. Thank you very much.
They're at the church garden. I didn't plant them.
I know, but you can dig them up and put something native. Okay.
Okay.
So I have a never-ending battle with poison ivy.
Yes.
Will perennials overwhelm poison ivy eventually?
Poison ivy is native, but it is very beneficial to some birds when the birds migrate. The berries of poison ivy are very nutritious. So, but I'm not saying don't get rid of poison ivy. Okay, I know it. We don't like to have it. So, what I do spray the poison ivy if I see it in a place where, it can be a problem, or it can be dug up if you dress,
I wear PPE when I pull it out of my yard because I'm so allergic to it.
Yeah, right. So don't go near it. But I don't know of anything that would, kill it. What do you say? Oh, go. Yeah, I know, but they would eat also everything else. So then.
Where do you recommend getting native seeds?
Okay, so that is where we connect to my table of seeds. Yeah, so I don't know if it comes up afterwards, but where to buy native plants. And sometimes they're hard to find. And sometimes in nursery might say, oh yeah, we have native plants, but then mostly they are cultivars and they're not the most desirable version. So my recommendation is to grow your own. And one inexpensive way to grow native plants is you get some empty gallon jugs. And we can do a whole workshop about that. I'm doing workshop. So you cut it, you make drainage holes, you make like a clamshell. This becomes a little greenhouse. You put the soil in the bottom, you put the seeds, you tape it shut. You put it outside in the rain and snow. Because many of the native plants require a period of cold stratification because they grew in this climate. So in order to germinate, they need to have the cold, wet weather. So there are nurseries or special places where you can buy the seeds. When we do the workshops, we bring the seed. These seeds I've collected either at my house or at the Sunny Meadow Pollination Garden. And I've picked the ones that need a small number of days for this cold stratification. So some you can plant them, they don't need any, some only 30 days. So they would still germinate if you planted them now. Like I said, try to do it in the milk jug. They stay protected, the chipmunks cannot go and dig them up. And then they get stronger being outside in the weather. Yes? Oh, a knife cutter, and what do you call that blade? Box cutter.
Box cutter.
You know, you put it sideways, you cut it as close to the handle as you can make it. Make several holes in the bottom. You don't want a swamp. It's very simple. So I brought seeds. Help yourself. Take as many as you want. There are packets. Write the name of what you're taking. There are some already pre-made packets. And those, don't take that whole packet like that because there is more than one supply, for one jug. So in case, if
So
I
take
don't-
them out of that packet.
yeah,
take some seeds out of the
maybe
packet.
take half or a third of that.
Okay.
Okay. So yeah, you can come to me for seeds because I still have so many. I'll have to feed the birds with those seeds.
And we're thinking about, you can get started this year. That would be great because Giancarlo has the seeds here, but we're thinking about doing a winter seed. Is that what it's called? Winter sow
Winter
workshop.
Workshop. Those
next
are done
year.
in January, February.
Yeah.
Where you can plant even those that need more days of
Right.
cold.
Any other questions? Oh,
Sure.
wait a minute. Let me.
Last year's green growth is still there. Do I cut it off to let the new growth come up, or
No, the new plant will come through even if you have the old plant.
so
there.
just leave them all?
Yeah, you can leave
Okay, will do.
it. Okay. All right, thank you very much. The next one.
Thank you. (168 Robin Hill Road in Chelmsford is where Giancarlo's garden is. Oh,
So, Sunny Meadow Farm is at 168 Robin Hill Road, and there are community gardens, there are small farmers. This is a town-owned land, but there's one section where I planted with a lot of volunteers an extensive pollination garden with plants from that list. So, and if you want me to give you a private tour, let me know and I'll meet you there. Or come to my house too.
thank you. Very good. Okay, so we're going to move on to our next speaker. Before we do, though, Tony Boucher is right there. He is on the Sustainability Committee, and he's taking everybody's names and email addresses so we can keep you informed about what's going on. Plus, this whole series was funded by the Tingsboro Local Cultural Council, which is supported by the Mass Cultural Council. So we need to let them know how many people attended our events, et cetera, before we get reimbursed for our expenses. So he'll be coming around maybe, or please make sure that he's gotten you into his system before it's done. And I am told, and I just tested it out, the coffee is ready, so help yourselves. Help yourselves to the coffee, and the water's hot now. Okay, so help yourselves. We're going to move on to the second part. Amy Pazerski is going to give you a case study, what she's done over the past 8 years in her own yard. So you can see a before and after and kind of some of the trials and tribulations she went through to get there. So let me tell you a little bit about Amy. She's a resident of Tingsboro. A lot of you know her already. She served on several elected and appointed boards, including her current service on the Sustainability Committee. Her interest in native plants and gardening started with reading Doug Tallamy's book, Bringing Nature Home. We have some books back over there for you to take a look at, and developed from there. She has taken several classes at the Native Plant Trust in Framingham, and for the past 8 years, she's been experimenting in her own yard with getting rid of grass and planting natives. In her professional life, she is a senior manager at Gage Construction in Newburyport, Massachusetts. She enjoys hiking, being in nature, spending time with her family and pets, and of course, all things flora and fauna. So welcome, Amy. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of microphones. Also, I lose my train of thought a lot, so that's why I get those here. All right, so we can go to the next slide. Go to the next slide. Oh, okay. Well, it wasn't when I looked at you again. Okay. So anyways, this is where I started, and these are actually pictures from like when we bought our house in 2009. So it was just a big open expanse of grass, very little trees in anywhere but, you know, the side yard, some in the back. And back in 2009, I knew like nothing about anything about yards. So I made a lot of decisions between then and when I really started on my native plant passion that I regret, but I've corrected a lot of those. One of them, I used to be a beekeeper. I'm no longer a beekeeper because I realized that everything I was trying to do in my yard, that was like going against what I was trying to do there. So, all right, so yeah, so I have 1.5 acres, which is like a pretty, you know, decent size, but not overwhelming. But it doesn't really matter, like, you know, Giancarlo said, like, you can have a tiny yard and you can still make a difference, getting rid of some of your lawn. So, okay, then we can go to the next one. So where I really started and where I think everyone should start is to know what's in your yard right now. So go around. I use Picture This. It's an app, and I use the paid version. I've been using it for the last 6 to 7 years. I find it to be relatively accurate, but you need to like kind of verify sometimes if, you know, if it's giving you the right result. And then if you want to get like really into it, Native Plant Trust has a Go Botany website where you can, you know, break down the plant and everything. I call it like, you know, nerding out on native plants. And then, so I know we kind of went over this a little bit, but I kind of break up the plants into 3 categories. So native, we talked about a lot in the last presentation. Non-native, you know, can be some of those plants you have that aren't necessarily going to spread everywhere on their own, but they're not native. So like, I have lavender in my garden because I love the smell of it, and I harvest it, and it does feed some of the pollinators, but it's not native. But it doesn't spread on its own like some of the invasive plants that we have. So invasives, I mean, there seems to be a lot more talk about invasives now, which is great, just making people aware. But, you know, those are the ones that are spreading everywhere out of control. And they're crowding out the spaces where there could be native plants. So, you know, I'm not going to name every one of these, but some of the common natives we have here, if you walk around your yard and you start, you know, snapping pictures of all the different trees and shrubs, you might find some of these, like red oak. We have a ton of red oak. We have a ton of white pines everywhere. Red maples, sugar maples, and then, you know, the shrubs. There's elderberry. Like, you can look around as, you know, spring progresses and you can see different things blooming. And once you know what it is, then it catches your eye as you're like driving around, like, oh, there's some elderberry over there, or there's some, you know, Japanese knotweed that we don't want to see. They kind of stick out like a sore thumb, and, you know, once you see it, you can't unsee it kind of thing. So, and then, you know, the herbaceous perennials like the milkweeds, goldenrod. We have a lot of goldenrod in town everywhere. And, you know, if you kind of explore some of our wooded areas, you can find some of these other ones too. So there's a chance you have them in your yard. And I just threw a few pictures up here. So yeah, like elderberry, evening primrose is all over the place. We have, I mean, if you look at some of the names of the streets in town, you can kind of get an idea, right? Like Chestnut Road, there used to be a lot of chestnuts in that area. They got killed off by a disease long ago, but you know, we have Primrose Lane. And so it's kind of like you can see where we have a lot of these just here already. So we can go to the next one. So when I started out in my yard, I had, thankfully, no Japanese knotweed. There's a tiny stand of it down the street from me, and I keep an eye on it like you wouldn't believe, because the minute that thing pops up anywhere near my property, like, I'm making a big deal to get rid of it, because that stuff is just so hard to get rid of. And then, you know, bittersweet. Everybody has bittersweet. It's everywhere, like everywhere. And anything you can do to stop it from progressing, whether you're cutting at the base and, you know, it's all up in the tree. Well, just cut at the base at the bare minimum so that it's not producing the seeds and the berries, and then the birds are eating the berries, they're pooping them out somewhere else, and the cycle continues. And it's kind of the same with a lot of these other ones too. So yeah, it can feel overwhelming. Like you're going around your yard and you're like, you feel like you're, you know, like taking a little piece of what the real problem is. But I will say that, you know, once you get your natives in there and you get them going, a lot of these things get crowded out and they don't end up coming back nearly at the strength they were before. We did talk about poison ivy a little bit. So I had someone tell me one time, and I kind of loved it, that poison ivy is the protector of the forest. A lot of times you'll find poison ivy growing along the edge of the forest. And I kind of love that because, I mean, I'm allergic to it too. Had it on my face, you know, it's terrible. But I make a point to leave it wherever I can, just because all the things that Giancarlo said, like, it is a very beneficial plant. It just, you know, it doesn't like humans that much. So I get the urge to get rid of it for sure. So I just threw a couple pictures of some of the invasives that we have around here. Ton of honeysuckle. I see that everywhere. I had a ton of buckthorn in my yard that I got rid of. I'll have a picture of that later. The bittersweet, multiflora rose, you see that everywhere. When that's blooming, it'll just start catching your eye everywhere. You're like, oh, there's some more of it. Japanese barberry. I went up to the Rachel Carson Preserve in Maine, and it's like sad to walk there because there is so much Japanese barberry in those woods. It's just everywhere. And when you see stuff like that, you're like, okay, I get it now. Like, this is why I want to take it out of my yard. I want to stop the cycle as much as I can as one person. So we can go to the next one. So reducing your lawn area, yeah. So it's a little intimidating, right? Because you're like, where do I even start? I will admit the first one that I did, we ripped up all the grass with like a tilling machine because I just didn't know better. And I was like, yep, I'm just going to do it that way. I hated mowing that part of my yard, and that's why I selected that part. It was like a hill, and it was just not convenient. And I was like, what can we do here? This was before my native plant anything. I was like, what can we do in this area so that we don't have to mow it? So, but all the ones I've done since then, I've done the cardboard method. So, you know, cardboard is just everywhere, right? Like, we're getting stuff from Amazon. You can go to the cardboard dumpster in town and get cardboard. You can get it from stores. It's pretty easy to come by. And then wood chips. So I don't know if anyone here has ever done chip drop, but it's a little bit of a it's a little bit of a gamble because you have to sign up and you have to agree to take like a whole truckload of wood chips, and they'll come whenever they come. So it's basically like tree services sign up for it, and then if they happen to be in your neighborhood and they're taking down a tree, then they'll say like, hey, I've got a truck full of wood chips, do you want them? So I've had like 2 truckfuls come to my house so far in the last like few years. It's a great workout to fill your wheelbarrow and walk it back and forth, but it's worth it. So the easiest, or I think the best way, is to do that work in the fall and then let it sit all winter, and when spring rolls around you can start planting stuff in that area. I do have one printout of this. I didn't make multiple printouts, but there is a pretty good resource from Native Plant Trust that kind of is very basic and just goes over what you can do to get rid of some lawn area and plant your native plants. So you want to make sure that you're planting them far enough apart so that they have room to expand. That was something I learned, that when I first started planting, I was like, I'm just gonna plant a ton right next to each other, and then a few years later I was like, oh, that wasn't the best idea. So I've learned that, at the beginning when you're planting stuff, it's going to look, and there'll be a picture on the next slide, but it's going to look kind of like sad when you first plant it, because it's gotta go through all these stages, right? So year 1 is like the root establishment, so you're not going to see a ton of activity above ground, and then year 2 the growth starts to pick up, and then in year 3 that's when you start really seeing some pretty robust plants come up. So I found that the first growing season that I plant things, I keep them pretty well watered, pay close attention to them, pay close attention to the weather, and then the subsequent growing seasons, I don't really do much of anything to my plants. They just take water from the ground. If there's a serious drought, like we had a few years ago, then I will go around and like give some supplemental water, but it's, and I have a slide on maintenance, but it's just so much less maintenance than dealing with a lawn in every way possible. And then I always tell people to cage their new plants with hardware cloth, because bunnies, we talked about bunnies, and deer, they're a little harder to keep out because they're taller. But I found that the hardware cloth works the best for the bunnies, and it just gives the plants a chance to establish themselves. And then, I don't mind feeding the bunnies after I've enjoyed the plants a little bit. So this is my front yard garden. This was the very first one I did. And so this is 2020. I actually started it in 2019, but I couldn't find a picture. So, I've got some non-natives in there. I've got an apple tree that I planted before I knew anything. I've got my lavender. And then, I tried to fill it in with the rest with natives. So here we are 3 years later, and, I think this might be like July. And it's like, you can barely even walk through here, right? Because it's just all filled in. So it doesn't take a lot of time, relatively speaking, but you have to have some patience. So, then I threw in 2024, and every year it's going to look a little different. One of the things that I did a lot of in this garden was living mulch. So, started out with the wood chips, but then planted some low-growing plants. Bearberry is a really great one, and wild strawberry. Those are the 2 that I have the most of in here. And I don't get weeds in this garden anymore, because this has just knocked out, all the open spaces where they could pop up. So I really love living mulch. there's no maintenance to it. You don't have to refill it every year. And there is all kinds of stuff living in there. I was just talking before this presentation. I've got some voles living in there. And yes, they did eat some of my plant roots, but that's kind of what I wanted, right? Like I wanted to attract those things because they're going to the bigger things like the hawk and other predators that come around and look for food. So yeah, it goes back to that messy thing. And I don't know what my neighbors think of my yard. I often wonder because I look around and everyone just has this big expansive green lawn and I'm over here like I don't know. It's messy. It looks messy, but it's also like, I don't know, there's beauty in it. So I just think it's worth it. So, this is like right at my front door. There used to be, I don't even know what kind of, it was like an evergreen or something that was not in a good spot because it was growing way tall. It was like encroaching into the front door entrance. So we ripped that out and, we've got some Joe Pye here and then we've got some clethra back there. These are both natives. And then this is a honeysuckle vine, native honeysuckle vine. And, I think this is probably about 3 or 4 years between those two pictures. And it's a great privacy plant. So, I can sit in my backyard and I can't even see the street. Perfect. That's what I want. All right. So, there's gardens and then there's also like the areas that you can kind of just let go wild a little bit, and I say that with like an asterisk, right? Because you can't just let it go and not pay attention to it because there's going to be invasives that pop up. There's going to be some maintenance to it. But I've just noticed that I see things popping up that are natives. And, you have to just kind of be very observant. The amount of time I spend just wandering around my yard looking at plants. But yeah, so I know we're going to have some more info on like where to get plants and things, but when it comes to trees, I really like the New Hampshire Forest and Land seedling sale. So again, patience. I buy bare root trees from there, and basically it just looks like you're bringing home a stick. Like that's what it looks like. But you plant it, and then 4 or 5 years later, you've got a pretty decent sized tree, and you only paid $10 or something for it, or not even that much. So instead of going to the garden center and getting like a full-grown tree, you can fill in a lot of their area that way, but it just takes some time. And then, so I kind of touched on that, but, have that ID app with you, and if stuff pops up, see what it is. If it's native, then leave it and let it fill in. So it's not all, it's not all bringing in plants from the outside. You definitely have native seeds, like in the seed bank in the soil. It's just that they've been suppressed, whatever was there. Yeah. So another area that we dug up the grass, and then again, before I knew what I was doing, I got just a generic wildflower mix that had a lot of non-natives in it. But it must have had brown-eyed Susan in it because those all popped up, which was awesome. And then this was an area where I took out a ton of buckthorn out of this area, and the ferns kind of took over. But I didn't plant any of those ferns. They all came in on their own. There's a ton of goldenrod in there. I did add some plants to that area, but I mean, that's like my little sanctuary that I go and hang out when I'm like stressed, and it's wonderful. So as far as maintenance, which I kind of alluded to a little bit earlier, there's just very little maintenance after the initial, first year of planting, at least that I found. And, that first growing season, you're going to want to keep an eye on things and see what invasives are coming up. There's always going to be bittersweet coming up somewhere. It's everywhere. And then, as it fills in, those invasives become less of an issue. And then, as I kind of said, I planted a lot of swamp milkweed at one point, and now I have a lot of the babies coming up in random spots. So when I find one, I just pick it up, I dig it out and put it where I want to put it in one of my gardens. And it's worked out really well. And then, like I said, I love sitting out in my yard and just watching all the nature that's coming to visit all these different things that I have now. And yeah, I think we can go to the next picture. So all these pictures are pictures I've taken in my own yard. So, that bird is going to feed one of its babies. It can't do that with birdseed. It needs, like Giancarlo said, they need the worms, they need the insects to feed their young. And then, the hummingbird, everybody loves the hummingbird. That's the best food for them, is the native plants. I don't have hummingbird feeders in my yard, but I get plenty of hummingbird activity. They come for my plants. And then, leaving the stems up in the winter, the seed heads. I've seen so many birds come to eat the seeds in the winter. And then that picture, obviously you can see, is a hawk with a bunny that it's about to eat. But, that's nature, right? So it's the bunnies are annoying, but they feed the hawk. So I don't want to get rid of the bunnies necessarily. Sometimes I do, but I don't. All right, we can do the next. And then, just, all the different insects that come to visit these plants. I mean, obviously there's the bumblebees, but there's also a ton of different kinds of wasps, the caterpillars. I don't even remember what these are called, but you start seeing all these insects that you never noticed before, or at least I like to go and look at the insects. I don't know if anybody else does. We can go to the next one. And, and then we get our little tree frogs, wasps. I don't love being stung by yellow jackets. I've been stung quite a few times, but they are pollinators and they are beneficial insects. So, if I have one of their nests in my yard and it's not a place where I'm going to walk and get stung, I leave it. Same with the bald-faced hornets, which even that name just sounds terrifying, right? But I had one of their nests in my yard and I didn't even know it for the whole season until the fall when I was walking by one day and I was like, oh, that's been there the whole time? I've walked past this thing 100 times. Never had an issue with them. And then, you see stuff like that where it's my mind for the longest time was trained to be oh my God, those insects are eating the plant. We got to get rid of those insects. I got to save my plant. Well, no, those are native. They're tussock moth caterpillars, and they're on common milkweed there. But, that's their food, and they're feeding other animals. So it's kind of that's what I want. That's what I wanted to happen. I wanted all these things to come and eat my plants. So I think that was the last one. Yeah. So we just have this quote from Doug Tallamy. He's I've read all his books. I've read a couple of them a few times. And it's just very inspiring to read his books and just very eye-opening that, everything is connected, and you feel like you're not doing a ton because you're just doing it in your small yard, but it does help. So I think that was it.
Put it right up to your mouth.
How do we find out what the more endangered animals are and what plants might be appropriate to feed them? A good source, an app or a book or whatever.
I don't know. Do you have recommendations for the bees, right? I mean, yeah, I'm not actually sure where the best place. I mean, Native Plant Trust has a pretty great website, and they cover a lot of different things in there. I don't know if they have anything specific to that, but that might be a place to start.
And I see some people scribbling down notes and stuff. If you get into the system, Tony's taking attendance there. If you give me your email address, I'll mail everybody a PDF of this whole presentation. Okay, so you'll have all the website and stuff. Heidi, did you have a question?
I'm fascinated by all of this. So, the screen where you showed all the work you've done around your lawn, I see a lot of green. Do you actually have flowering plants there?
Yeah. So, I know I tried to take tried to pick out pictures that were showing at different times, but yeah. So you're talking like within the garden, like where the garden I planted is?
Yeah, all out in front of your house. And I guess before I lose this, a follow-up question is the green plants that you have out there, can you give us some names of those that you use?
Yeah.
Or are they just in the growing stage where they haven't started blooming yet?
No, so the lower growing plants down here, there's a lot of bearberry in here. So bearberry will spread quite a bit. And then wild strawberry is the other one that it spreads pretty well, pretty quickly. So this is a lot of wild strawberry, and then the bearberry is harder to see, but it's kind of like under the surface there. But the other nice thing about that is that, every year, so bearberry is evergreen. So year round, when it's not covered in snow, it's green. But it has the cycle where it has some dead leaves that come off, and then that ends up feeding the soil below it. So it's kind of like a win-win. But we got some swamp milkweed here. This up here is ironweed, but it's not in bloom yet. So it's just got the green. And then there's some butterfly weed over here. And then there's a lot of agastache in here. Some of those aren't there anymore. Like if I took a picture of this garden last year, I had that issue with the vole. So, which I'm calling an issue, but it's really not, because I want the vole to be there. I want all those animals to be there so that it can feed other stuff. So I just wish that it hadn't eaten my plants that I paid money for, but that's all right. So. We haven't had a chance to, because other stuff's eating them. So I kind of just gave up on eating strawberries from my yard. It'll feed the animals.
You mentioned not planting plants too close to each other. What was your experience with respect to that issue?
So it just, so I mean, when you buy the plant, right, it's got it's going to tell you how much space it's going to take at maturity. The bearberry is a good example, because the bearberry, I think they tell you that can be 8 to 10 feet or something at maturity. And when you're buying this little plant in the whatever gallon bucket, you're like, yeah, right. That's not really going to be that much. but then like I probably could have planted like 2 or 3 less of those plants in here, and it probably would have filled in just fine. But so I think it's like, you know, part of it is like you don't have to buy as many plants if you're taking into consideration that they're gonna fill in. Yeah. Yeah, but then it can kind of get overcrowded if you put too many too close to each other. So then you're like in a situation where it's like, oh, should I move them somewhere else and use them in a different area? Which I have done plenty of, and I say don't be afraid to move plants if you need to make it work. So. How much lawn do I have left? So I stopped mowing a large portion of my side yard, and it's kind of a mess right now. So I don't really consider that lawn. I mean, I would say maybe, I don't know, like less than a quarter of an acre, probably less than that. Yeah. Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
So clover is listed as a spreader. Is that good or bad?
So, I mean, clover is non-native, but if you're comparing clover and lawn, I would take the clover.
Okay.
You know, it flowers, it helps the soil, and I just think that it doesn't require as much maintenance as lawn. You don't have to fertilize it and do all that part of it. So I would definitely say, like, if you're looking for something that's still low growing that you can still like walk on, then clover would be a good alternative, even though it's not native.
We took a pool down last year, and so we were left with this big round circle of sand.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were able to get rid of some of it, and then we brought in like dirt and compost and everything and tilled it in. And I did put white clover down, and within a month, the area was filled in.
Yeah.
And so now it's like, oh, do I want to just keep putting more clover seed down and hope it takes over the grass, or do I just let it naturally work its way?
Yeah, I mean, so I've been battling, I don't even remember what the invasive thing is called in my grass. I don't really have any lawn, really. It's like just random stuff that I mow so I can walk over it. But there was a section where I took out some plants I wanted to get rid of, and I did plant a bunch of clover there, and it does seem to be kind of taking off on its own. So, I mean, I think, if you have like bare spots, I would definitely say like throw some more seed down on it, because if you don't, something else is gonna move in there. But yeah, I think clover is a good alternative to lawn for sure.
Any other questions?
As far as the clover goes, we started putting clover in our yard, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago, and it does spread. It's slow. It's not crazy or out of control. We mow it like we mow the grass, and works out fine, and I prefer it. It doesn't need any fertilizer or anything, so it's doable. Yeah. It does take time like grass does too, but in a different way. It's not maintenance required, so.
Okay. Thank you again, Amy. That was very good. Thank you. Okay, I have to change the slide at the same time. Next up is going to be Debbie Schneider. Let me see if I can. Debbie is a retired foreign language teacher, and she currently serves on the Sustainability Committee as well as the Tyngsboro Garden Club. As one of the founding members of the Tyngsboro Garden Club 40 years ago, she was also the She was also years and been the 3-time past president. Debbie's also been involved as part of the Garden Club in many town-wide gardening projects throughout the years. As the Garden Club learns about their importance from guest speakers, the Garden Club's plantings around town have a growing emphasis on native plants. At home, Debbie maintains a backyard friendly to birds, bees, and other pollinators with several perennial gardens. So I have to get to her presentation here. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about tips for getting started in your own yard and resources that are available.
Hit the green button. There it is. Okay. Before I start, I just wanted to point out something with the paperwork up at the front, which, okay. This is from Dr. Jaguar. And on the back, this is not as complete as the separate page that you should look at instead. It's more updated. We had printed the other one up before it got edited a little more carefully. So it's basically the same, but there's more on here and better things. So this one is better. Okay, just wanted to point that out. Well, Amy and Giancarlo have done a lot of what I'm going to talk about, but so we will be able to go through this fairly quickly. But if you're just starting out with a garden, you want to go small, and you have to identify a space that you want to in your lawn with no invasives, if you can do that. Choose a sunny spot. Flowers, perennials need minimum 4 to 6 hours, even more if you can. No shade. They don't like shade. Make sure you can get some water to them. And this is what Amy had talked about, preparing the area, killing the grass. The cardboard is really one of the better methods. Thick wads of newspaper, if you have a small area, will work also. And as I was reading, if you're starting out in a small area, pick 3 native plants for each season except for the winter. And then they will spread, as Amy has alluded to. And then you can select some annuals for fillers, like zinnias, lantana, and salvia. Those are all fairly native annuals. There are lots of plant ID apps out there. One of them that I have looked at is Seek with an exclamation point. There is a native, what's the thing for this? National Invasive Species Info Center, that's this one, which will tell you how to eradicate other invasive species. And the whole key is to try not to disturb the soil too much, because then you're kind of spreading the seeds more. So if the invasives are small, like if you see a little small plant of bittersweet, it's just easier to pull it out. And but then not every plant is small, as I think Amy had suggested, or maybe Giancarlo, to cut it at the base. What else? Oh, if you're not starting a new garden and you have an established garden, as many of us do, try to have at least 50% minimum of your plants be native. Now, I've been gardening a long time, and I have just recently realized with the whole native plant movement, which is a fairly recent movement, isn't it? Hostas are not native. Daylilies are not native. There's a lot of non-natives in my yard because I didn't know any better. right? You trade plants. We have our plant sale in May, and we dig up all these things, and that's what they are. So you don't have to get rid of them all, though. Your goal is to try to add more native plants to your area. As far as disturbing the soil, if you can't pull it out, you keep trimming it with a weed whacker or some shears. You can smother. If there's grass there, you're going to smother it like we had talked about before with cardboard or thick newspapers. And if you have a stump in your lawn, you can cover it with a landscape fabric, but they do not want you to use herbicides to try to kill anything. You can saw them down. You can dig them out with a hori-hori knife. Do you know what a hori-hori knife is? Oh, I should have brought my hori-hori knife. I forgot. It's like a, I don't know, it's a knife, but it has all these edges on it. It is the best tool for digging out things. And you can really get underneath it, and you won't wreck the rest of the dirt all around it. Hori, Hori. Hori. I should have brought it. Huh? It's Japanese. And it's not native. It's not native. But it works really good. Okay. Let's see. They have shovels that are like that too, right? So that have the edges on them. Oh boy, that's like, yeah, the Root Slayer. Yes, the Root Slayer shovel. It's awesome. But the whole idea is try to make it a minimal soil disturbance. Okay, so you dig up all these invasives. What the heck do you do with them? You got to let them dry out. You make sure you get all the flowers, the stems, the berries, the roots, the leaves, the whole shebang, and you put it on a pallet or a tarp or even in your driveway in a sunny spot and let them dry out. And then if they're not quite dry enough, or you don't want, if they're really starting to dry, you don't want them to blow away, you can put them in a plastic bag, still keep it in the sun, and let them dry out some more. So you're looking at 3 to 6 weeks probably before you really kill them. Okay? So, then what do you do with them, right? Well, from what I've read, they suggest that you put the invasives in its own special, they should be dead by now, right? Put them in their own special compost pile and let them decompose, but then you have to monitor it to make sure that you're not getting sprouts still from something else, because these invasives are really awful. So, okay.
Debbie,
I think
can I interrupt you for a second?
yes.
My understanding is in Massachusetts, you cannot put leaves, plants, etc., in the trash. They're
right.
prohibited from the trash. But I believe the one exception is if you did bag those invasives, you can put those
You can
in
put
your
them in the trash.
in your household trash.
Yes.
So that's
yes.
a quicker way to get
in
rid
a
of it.
Yeah, if you really want, if you don't have room for a compost pile or you don't want to compost, you can do that. You're right, Diana. Thank you.
Yeah. We do have a
Dead.
bag there. So you'd be risking spreading it if you put it there, because the birds could come and
Yeah. Okay, next. Okay, so there is a movement afoot called the Homegrown National Park, and the founder is Doug Tallamy, who has also written many books about natives. And you can read it up here. Our national parks, no matter how grand in scale, are too small and separated from one another to preserve native species. Thus, the concept for Homegrown National Park, a bottom-up call to action to restore habitat where we live and work, and to a lesser extent where we farm and graze, extending national parks to our yards and communities. So, first of all, who the heck is Doug Tallamy? All right. He is an entomology and wildlife ecology professor at the University of Delaware. And he is the co-founder of this homegrown national park. It's a nonprofit which he started in Delaware only in 2021. So it's only 5 years old. He claims, and this is true, home gardens bridge the gaps between parks and preserves. As he says here, the national parks are so big, but we have the Lowell National Park. There's not too many natives there. Okay? So the home gardens bridge the gaps between parks and preserves, providing habitats for native species and insects and birds. Individual actions, each one of us, can impact biodiversity and conservation. You can list your yard as part of the nationwide network on his Homegrown National Park website. By planting native species which are more drought tolerant, yard maintenance will be easier, as Amy has just so recently told us, and more supportive of pollinating insects and birds. 75 to 90% of all plants need pollinators. So if we don't encourage the pollinators, we're kind of doomed. Okay, next. This is the Homegrown National Park biodiversity map. And the darker green areas are where most of the activity is in this Homegrown National Park section. As you can see further out in the country, there's not as much Homegrown National Park. It's mostly on the East Coast and the Midwest. And because he lives in Delaware and he's on the East Coast, it's been easier probably to spread that information. But we can each do our own part by joining this organization and registering our yard. Let's see. Lesser green is growing. You can also click on this and it'll tell you, like in Massachusetts, we only have 927 acres that belong to this Homegrown National Park. So if we all register our yards, maybe we'll get over 1,000 acres, okay? And these other things are how many people have joined. You can add your yard to the map and encourage people to join, even if it's very small, even if he says his whole thing is just to encourage people to become part of this nature conservancy. And even if you have like container gardens in your yard, that counts too. Okay. Let's see. So he is inviting everybody to join. Aims to serve as a central hub for biodiversity restoration. Okay. You can go to the next one. We don't know whether this works or not. No. That was my phone. Ding. I couldn't get it yesterday either when I was trying to review it, but all right. Well, then that's not going to work, is it? Okay. It's all right. It's almost time to go anyway. Okay. Yes, this is what the Homegrown National Park website looks like. And there's all kinds of links to all kinds of things. Is this the video? It's not the video, is it? No. Anyway, if you go here, there's a video on how to sign up. Yep. Okay. Mm-hmm. Many videos, he has many videos on YouTube also. Okay. So he has at least 4 books out: Bringing Home Nature, The Nature of Oaks, Nature's Best Hope, and The Woods in Your Backyard, and 3 of the books are up there. And this is the website up here. The Native Plant Trust is also known as the Garden in the Woods in Framingham. Yes, it's the same outfit. It's the same organization. So this Eric Sechler is a program director. He's the ecological program director for the Native Plant Trust, specializing in invasive plant eradication strategies. So you can get online, look at the Native Plant Trust, and click on Eric. And if you're having problems with invasives, you can go and see what he has to say about that. Giancarlo mentioned Dr. Robert Giguere. He is a pollination, listen to this guy. He's a pollination ecologist, conservation biologist, associate professor at UMass Dartmouth, and founder and director of the New England Beecology Project. He conducts research on pollen and nectar preferences of native bees, butterflies, and moths, with emphasis on the bumblebee. So he is very well versed, and this is one of his websites. This other woman here, Barbara Young, she is the founder of the Big Little Garden. We have had her speak at our garden club. She has lots of information about no-till gardening and mulching, attracting pollinators, and use of native plants in your yard. She does private consultations if you're interested in having somebody come out and look at your yard. And for a fee, she'll come to your yard, give advice, and will buy plants for you at wholesale garden centers she works with. She was an excellent speaker at our garden club. And there's another woman that's not listed up here. Betty Sanders is an author of Gardening for a Lifetime. She's a master gardener, a lecturer, and a scientist, and an accredited Master Flower Show judge. Betty on gardening.com. We've also had her. Next, where to buy the native plants. If you sign up for the thing, you'll be able to see, but look, Mahoney's Garden Center, this Blue Stem Natives in Norwell, Country Brook Farms, that's right around the corner from here. Lake Street Garden Center in Salem, which is very good, and Bagley Pond Perennials, plus the ones that, Amy, you mentioned also. And the Native Plant Trust sells plants also in Framingham, and they are affiliated with this Nasami Farms in Whatley, Mass. I don't know where Whatley is, okay, but it must be down that way somewhere. It's in the woods. Is it? Do you know where it is, Karen? Okay. And I think that's it.
I'm going to grab that one. Oh, this is working now. All right, so do we have any specific questions for Debbie? This is not working. Any questions? Okay. It was very, so I have, okay.
So I'm guilty of stopping along the roadside and taking some perennial, what did you call them, the plants, natives. Am I going to get arrested for that? I heard there's a fine. Yeah, you can't just stop on a highway or something. That's what I've heard. Will do.
Yes. So we're not done yet. One more second. So today's conversation focused on the landscapes that we manage every day, yards, gardens, and open spaces, and how those spaces function as part of a larger system. The choices that we make in these spaces influence how water moves, how soil holds together, and how plants and wildlife interact over time. Those effects extend beyond individual properties and contribute to a broader condition across the community. Throughout this 3-part series, Roots of Resilience, we've looked at food systems, community preparedness, and now the role of our own landscapes. Each of these operates at a different scale, but they are all connected. Thank you for taking the time to learn, ask questions, and consider how your own space fits into that system. We'd also like to thank the Tingsboro and the Mass Cultural Council for their financial support for our series. So thank you all very much. Yeah, and so now, the seeds are up here, the books for you to look at in case you want to get your own. These are our personal books, so please don't take them away. But help yourself to the seeds, and good luck everybody getting started in your own yards. Thank you.